and actually my favorite section of the plant structure, because there's some really cool things that plants do. I know some of us are like, yeah, whatever. And actually, it wasn't until like maybe a year ago that I actually started liking plants, and I thought they're really cool. So, anyways, I actually, I only have 3 to my name. Hey, but that's 3 more than I had, right? So plants are pretty cool. I'm going to tell you guys about some of the things they do, but look at these beautiful pictures first. Just take in the glory of the plants. No, okay. So we touched on fertilization, not touched on, we talked a lot about fertilization in the last episode. So real quick, to kind of finish up with fertilization, I wanted to let you know that obviously when a pollen grain reaches the pistil, okay, so you have to think about those reproductive structures again. I didn't quite go over this in detail, so I wanted to touch on it. So when a pollen grain reaches the pistil, it grows a thin tube to the ovary, okay, so it's kind of like the pollen grain reaches it, and this the pistil, it grows this tube kind of going down to the ovary, which is at the base. Okay, the sperm from the pollen grain combines with an egg. So believe it or not, it is kind of, not the sperm that we think of, but it is that male reproductive gamete. Okay, so that sperm from the pollen grain combines with an egg and a seed forms. Okay, so fertilization. Right here it even says pollen lands on stigma, tube grows down the style, and enters the ovary. Okay, fertilization is the combination of sperm from a pollen grain with an egg to form a seed. Okay, so a seed is the zygote. That zygote is they fertilized. Just like for us, a zygote in humans is a fertilized egg where the sperm and the egg have joined. Okay, so kind of similar in plants. How close we're related to plants. How interesting. Okay, so the seed formation. So after fertilization, the flower actually dries up and the petals fall off. Okay, so interesting that that's always what's happening. It's this constant cycle of reproduction. But so fertilization will occur, those petals will dry up, fall off, and it leaves just the pistil and its ovary. Okay, so you can kind of see some of these where they're just kind of chilling out here. Okay, and the seed starts to form. All right, the top of the pistil falls off and the ovary gets larger as one or more seeds grow inside it, okay? So you can see that now there's, and I actually want to encourage you guys, maybe if any of you guys have apple trees, okay, I used to live at a house where we had like 3 apple trees, and it was really kind of cool to actually see what was going on. You can see that you'll have that huge blossom of the apple trees, okay, and all the flowers are there, okay, but as those flowers start to dry up, you have that fertilization, and you can start to kind of watch this. So watch that, okay, the top of the pistil will fall off, the ovary gets larger, and one of those seeds will start to form inside of it, okay? And then when the seeds are formed, the ovary dries up and the seeds fall out. Sometimes, depending on what we're talking about, but a lot of times the seeds will fall out of certain particular types of flowers and such, okay? All right, so an example of some of the seeds that fall out that we eat, corn, beans, peas, those are, typical seeds that tend to fall out, and we actually eat those. Yummy, yummy, yummy. All right, fruits, okay? Have you ever thought of what you're eating when you bite into a fruit? I'm not sure if you really want to know this, but I'm going to tell you. So it's going to make you think of eating fruit a little differently. Now, I love fruit, so it didn't scare me away, but guess what you're eating? Yeah, an ovary. If you just ate an apple, you ate an ovary. Gross. Yeah, it kind of sounds really nasty. But that is what the fruit is. The fruit is the ovary that has grown and grown after fertilization. Okay, so kind of crazy, right? Okay, interesting. So remember, the ovary started at the base. Well, that ovary, the fertilized seed is inside, and that ovary will continue to grow. And depending on what we're talking about, can turn into a fruit. So simple fruits result from a single ovary, okay? Pretty easy. So this is an example of a simple fruit, like your peach, nectarines and such. You have a single ovary, okay? And you have this fruit that grows around. So typically, if you have one seed or one pit, that's a simple fruit. Your compound fruits develop from a group of individual ovaries and may be either an aggregate or a multiple fruit. So, you have your raspberries, your tomatoes, your pea pods and different things like that are your compound fruit, okay? All right, now let's talk a little bit about survival. Survival of the fittest. No, really, what do plants need to survive? Well, you guys know most of this stuff, especially if you have plants in your house. Maybe your mom makes you water the plants, and you're like, yeah, I know they need water. Well, of course they need sunlight, okay, because we know that they need to undergo photosynthesis, right? So energy of the sun captured by the chlorophylls, okay, this is blast from the past, remember? We talked about photosynthesis in Bio A. So sun's captured by the chlorophyll, and it's used to join the CO2 and the H2O to form glucose. That's photosynthesis. All right, so plants need broad leaves to maximize that light absorption. So typically you'll find leaves that are kind of broad, and you'll notice they kind of move a little bit towards the sunlight, okay? So in order to maximize, obviously, that energy. They need water and minerals, okay? The roots absorb the water and the minerals, so typically if you're growing a plant, you might have to have particular soil. You can't just go and dig some sand, or dirt, that has no nutrients. The plants will typically die. So, for me, I had to repot some of my plants because they were getting bigger. Oh my gosh, yeah, that's crazy. But I had to actually go and buy soil with some minerals already in it because our soil is pretty horrible. But anyways, gas exchange, okay? Remember, in photosynthesis, you need CO2, the plants need CO2, and they give off oxygen. So you have those stomatas, which are kind of those, I call them like pores. They're openings in the leaf that open up and they can close, okay? And they open up for gas exchange. They also open up or close to keep moisture in. So that's very important. And then obviously the movement of water and nutrients. So obviously we talked about a couple sections ago, the xylem and the phloem. So most plants have those tubes. The phloem brings the nutrients down and all that stuff to kind of the different parts of the plant. And xylem is always going up. It's taking water from the roots and moving up the plant, okay? And then some small plants like mosses, they just use diffusion. They don't really have, those are their non-vascular plants that we've discussed before, okay? Tropisms, these are my favorite. I think these are really cool. This has to do with your journal, by the way. You have a journal assignment, and you're going to see a lot of these different videos. You can pick from a couple of different ones, and they're kind of cool, so I think you'll enjoy it. But tropisms are plant movements based on environmental stimulus, okay? So moving or growing toward or away from a stimulus is basically what we're talking about. And there's many different types. This one that we're talking about is gravitropism, okay? Response to gravity. So it's interesting that plants do have this response to gravity. If you were to put a plant on its side, it's still going to grow up, okay? It's not going to grow out. It's not going to grow down. It's going to fight gravity, which I think is really interesting, okay? So that's gravitropism. Phototropism is something that you can typically see a lot, especially with sunflowers. I went to college 1 year in North Dakota. Scary. It was interesting. But they had lots and lots of it. It's obviously a huge agricultural state. So they have these huge fields full of sunflowers. And it's really cool, though, because depending on, the time of day you drive by it, all the sunflowers are facing the sun. That is an example of phototropism. They're going to respond to light. So you notice that these pictures are showing that the plants are actually not gravitating, but they are moving towards the light, okay? Same with this one right here. You can see the light source is coming from over here, and they're kind of moving towards that. And obviously because they want to undergo photosynthesis and obviously get that light energy that's needed. I don't have a picture of this one, but chemotropism is response to chemicals. So there are certain chemicals that plants can respond to, and I don't have any great examples, nor could I find any pictures. But it's talked about in your lesson a little bit more, but know these different terminologies. Chemotropism, obviously response to chemicals. Thigmotropism, response to touch. This one is really cool. I have a great video to show you guys. Some of you guys may have heard of this, but it's a mimosa plant, and it has this crazy response to touch or to heat. So watch this. I think it's kind of cool. You guys might like it. Okay, so you guys get the idea. Anyways, pretty cool. I didn't want to bore you too much with that, but nonetheless, it's not that boring. It's kind of cool, but you see it over and over again. Okay, so anyways, those are tropisms. So know what each of those mean, okay? All right, on to hormones. Plant hormone classes. There are tons of hormones in plants, and sometimes we don't really really? Hormones in plants? Okay, didn't know that. And we're going to talk about a lot of hormones in the human body coming up in the next unit, okay? But hormones are chemicals produced in one part of the body that has a target elsewhere in the body. And that goes the same for a plant. So they're produced in one part of the plant, but they might target a different part of that plant. So we're going to go through some of these, and I would like you to know, just a little bit about each of these. They're pretty quick, and they're weird names. So you might want to write them down, okay? Because that way you have them on the test if I ask you any questions on any of the hormones, okay? So hormones, again, like I said, they're going to target different parts. But one of the first ones is auxins. Auxins are the plant growth hormone. It promotes cell and stem elongation, okay? So obviously it makes the plant go whoop. And fruit development as well, okay, which is produced in the stem tip. So it's the first plant hormone that was actually discovered. Auxin is the main reason for phototropism because remember, it needs light in order for kind of that growth, that photosynthesis that allows it to produce its food and ultimately grow. Okay, so auxin, kind of like our growth hormone, is what that is. Okay, you have and I'm not good at saying this, gibberellins. Okay, promotes stem elongation as well. Okay, so that's one that just is going to kind of do a little bit of the same. It's going to cause a stem elongation, but not really grow outwards, more in length. Okay, so here's kind of an interesting picture that shows a little bit about this type of hormone. We notice that high-yielding semi-dwarf rice has reduced endogenous gibberellin. Okay, so you have a tall plant that probably has an increased amount, where this dwarf plant has less. Okay, so again, it says also fewer flowers and larger fruit. Okay, the less there is, okay, versus the more. Okay, fewer flowers, larger fruit. Delayed fruit harvest, increased fruit size. Okay, so the more of the gibberellins, then you're going to have these things right here. Okay, so it's kind of interesting. Fewer flowers, larger fruit, delayed fruit harvest, increased fruit size. So these GAs, okay, they call them GAs, are used commercially to increase fruit size in table grapes and to regulate citrus flowing and rind maturation. So this is already a hormone that's within a plant, but I want to tell you that this is how, sometimes you'll get these monstrous grapes. Oh my gosh, we got these grapes and they were actually horrible. But we got them from Costco, and they were literally like this big. And we're like, what the heck is wrong with these mutant grapes? Well, a lot of, these crop growers are starting to use these hormones. And even though they are plant hormones, they're still using extra hormones in these plants for either, growth in the fruit, or allowing it to harvest in the, right time, the, perfect place, that whatever it might be, okay? So anyways, I just want to show you that picture that, giving plants more of this hormone will cause these things, okay? I prefer no hormones, just to let you know. But you guys can develop your own thoughts about that. Cytokinins promote cell division produced in the meristems, okay? So remember the meristems, which was a long ago, kind of close to the root, and basically that's where some of the cell growth starts, and where kind of cell elongation can happen, and cell width. So this is obviously very important. Cell division is part of cell growth as well, okay? So that's what's going to happen. And I can't remember what this picture was actually showing, to be honest. I'm assuming that the plant on the right had more of it, but I don't know. For some reason, I can't remember what my picture was. It's late. What can I say? Abscisic acid, okay, inhibits cell growth and promotes seed dormancy. So obviously another hormone that is naturally forming in a plant, because at some point in the different seasons, okay, you need to inhibit the cell growth and promotes that seed dormancy, okay? So usually in the fall, that's when you're going to see that abscisic acid is going to be increasing within those plants, okay? Ethylene promotes the ripening of fruit. So as you can think, there'd be a lot of, crop growers and agriculturalists that are probably using ethylene to ripen the fruit faster so that they can get fruit out into the stores, okay? Again, not something that I necessarily agree with, because you're, taking nature under your own control, but nonetheless, that's what happens a lot, okay? So excess of ethylene can also cause crops to, turn rancid, because obviously you're ripening too fast. So, all right, so let's talk about some visuals. I'm going to show you a quick video on kind of the plant hormones, all right? Here we go. Buffering. Can't stand that. I'm probably not going to get to show you it all, because anytime it does that while I'm teaching, it never continues on. Oh well, okay. I might just post this. How about Okay. Well, anyways, it does show you that obviously plants have hormones and use hormones just like humans, okay? And they do lots of different things within the plant. Okay, now moving on. Leaves, let's talk a little bit about leaves and the gas exchange. Remember I told you about the stomata. Okay, so you have that opening and closing. So it's going to take in CO2 and release oxygen. It can also do the opposite. How? Well, it just basically can take in oxygen if need be, and it rarely is going to expel any CO2, but it can do the opposite. Gas exchange takes place at the stomata. It's not open all the time, okay, so it's basically can open and close, and it's controlled, basically the opening of it is controlled by water pressure in the guard cells. The guard cells are exactly what what they say. They guard that opening, and so if there's a lot of water pressure, typically it's going to keep it closed. If there's not a lot, or actually it's typically the opposite too, because if the plant needs more water, a lot of times it'll close up to kind of keep the water in the plant. So I think the less pressure in the guard cells. I think I was explaining that wrong. So it's controlled by the guard cells. Now the transport in plants, water transport, active transport, and root pressure is going to cause water to move from the soil to the roots. Okay, so we talk about the xylem and phloem, but we don't talk about that till it gets in the plant. But actually, the water has to absorb. So that active transport and what we call root pressure, there's actually this pressure difference, kind of a pressure gradient, and that's going to cause water to move from the soil into the roots. Kind of like osmosis, where you have something of greater concentration that wants to go to lesser concentration. I always think of, like, I'm not a huge person for crowds, and anytime I'm in a crowd, I'm like, get me out of here. Well, that's kind of what the water's doing in the soil. It's like, I want to go to where there's not as much water, so it goes into the roots. Okay, capillary action combined with active transport and root pressure moves materials throughout the plant. Okay, so once it's in the roots, you have something called capillary action, and it basically is just going to move that water up until it reaches the top of the plant. Okay, and then transpiration is something that maybe you guys have heard about when we talk about the water cycle. Yes, it's part of the water cycle. So transpiration is evaporation, the major moving force, basically. So as water's lost, osmotic pressure moves water out of the vascular tissues. Okay, this water's pulled up from the stem to the leaves, and it's affected by the heat and the humidity and the wind. So if all of those are typically higher heat, higher humidity, higher wind, you're gonna have a lot more transpiration. Okay, so basically water is lost from those leaves, and that's not a bad thing. It's not like it's harming the tree necessarily, because typically they're doing it because they have an excess of water, and they're constantly bringing more water up through the roots. Okay, so that's just a normal occurrence. Okay, and then controlling transpiration, again, has to do with the stomata. So open the stomata, increase water loss. Close the stomata, decrease water loss. So here's a good picture. This is a stomata, and right here on the outside are the guard cells, okay? And that's what can control opening and closing. But depending on if you want more water loss, the stomata is going to open. If you want to keep water in, it's going to close. Okay, easy as that. So transpiration and wilting. Osmotic pressure keeps plants semi-rigid. So basically the water pressure within the plants keeps them kind of rigid. That's why they can stand up tall. Okay. Wilting is a result of high transpiration rates. So if you start to see your plants start to wilt, especially out in the sun, if it's a hot day and those plants are starting to wilt, you know that there's been too much transpiration and the water is starting to leave the plants. Okay. Loss of water causes a drop in osmotic pressure, loss of rigidity, and then, basically the plant can't conserve the water that it needs, and sometimes it can die. But you can also save the plant by watering it. Hello! Yes, so that's transpiration and wilting. That's why a plant will wilt. Okay, so we're finished. I went a little long in this section, but after watching this, you're pretty much done with plant structure. So I can't wait for our next unit, and yeah, I love Jim Carrey, by the way. So if you guys have questions on any of the stuff that I ever talk about, please never hesitate to email me. Let me know if there's anything that I can answer. All right, peace out.